That's important. So we'll count down then from 5. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Police, Fire and Crime Panel. It falls to me today to open the proceedings because the first item on the agenda is election of panel chair, and members will note there's a guidance note at item 1 around that. So this is to appoint the panel chair for the next 12 months. The chair must come from among the councillor members to the panel, but all members of the panel can take a vote on this. So I'm going to invite proposals, and these must be seconded. So can I ask for nominations for panel chair, please? Councillor Taylor. Thank you. And is that seconded? Councillor Morehouse, thank you. Thank you. Are there any other nominations? No? Okay, so we have one nomination that's seconded for Councillor Wilkinson. All in favour say aye. Aye. Okay, handing over to you then. Congratulations, thank you. Is that still on?
Thank you, members, and thank you for your confidence in me for the next 12 months. I do appreciate it. Can I welcome everybody to the meeting? Joe, can I ask you to quickly introduce your team that's with you today? Do I just...
Oh, there we go. Sorry. Morning, everyone. So to my left, Rachel Antonelli, the monitoring officer for the Combined Authority, and to my the far end, Mark Ayres, who's the acting director of Public Confidence. To his left, Tamara Stevens, who is the director of Assurance, Delivery and Assurance. The Deputy Chief Constable, Scott Bissett, is to her left, and the Chief Fire Officer, Jonathan Dyson, is to his left. Does that make sense? Hopefully.
And could I also welcome the former Commissioner, Metcalfe? Metcalfe, to the meeting. You're very welcome, sorry. So this meeting is not being live streamed and recorded. And my note says, can speakers ensure they don't block the microphone with laptops so they can hear the sound properly? So thank you. We're not expecting a fire test. So if the alarm sounds, please evacuate back and down the main stairs through the reception to the car park. Apologies, Diane.
Yes, thank you. We have apologies from Councillor Michael Pavlovic and Councillor Steve Shaw-Wright, but we have Councillor Melanie Davis substituting for Councillor Shaw-Wright. Yep, sorry, apologies for Councillor Tim Grogan also.
Yeah. 3 declarations of interest. Martin, Mags, I believe you would like to make your...
So Mags Godridge, CEO of Survive, and we receive funding from the Deputy Mayor's Office to deliver counselling to victims of crime, including domestic violence and sexual violence.
Martin Walker, trustee of IDAS, a charity based in York and North Yorkshire that delivers services for domestic violence and sexual violence, and we receive funding from the Deputy Mayor's Office.
Thank you, Dan. Could we move on to item 4, minutes of the panel meeting held on the 1st of May? Are members happy the minutes are a correct record? I'm sure.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Those are approved and I'll sign those. Diane, agenda item.
Just leave you over.
Apologies. Progress on the items raised by the
Okay, is that working? Don't touch anything. Right, yes, it was just really in relation to, so it's page 16.1. And I mean, I wasn't at the last meeting, but I understand the questions were around the strategic aims of the Sexual Assault Referral Centre, which for me was more around the number of people they're seeing in the centre rather than referring out. So I guess it was a supplementary question about the numbers actually using the forensic suite, or the numbers actually giving evidence from there, which is, I believe, the main strategic aims of that centre. And then the second thing was a bit more about the context of the referrals, because I think looking at the number 778, the number of referrals that have gone into commissioned services, as a standalone figure, it doesn't really say much, but I know that's nearly more than double what would have traditionally been sent through commission services. So I think it would be helpful to get an idea of how that number has grown over recent years. So two things: the actual use of the SARC, as in not referring out but people referring in, and understanding the trajectory of those referrals would be helpful.
Thank you, Max. Joe?
Oh, there we go. Just have to press it a few times. Thanks, Mags, for the question. Jenny Newbury, who's the Director of Commissioning Services, isn't actually present today. If it's helpful, I'll probably get you an answer in writing, if that's all right, about the numbers using the SARC, and any updated information around patterns of referrals in as well. I can do that. We'll
Thank you, Joe. The next is item 2, which was we're waiting for further information regarding the Supreme Court ruling on the legal definition of a woman. Joe, do you want to speak to that? This is going to be a nightmare.
A recurring theme. There we go. My understanding is that the MPCC has made some further recommendations since the last meeting, and that the force is following those recommendations from the MPCC. Given that we've got the Deputy Chief Constable here, I don't know whether there's anything further on that he may want to add, but that was my understanding of where things were.
Yeah. Yeah, not a lot to add. Obviously, North Yorkshire Police will follow the law. You'd expect us to say that. That means that we're respectful for different people, different sexualities. But actually, essentially, if we think about policing, this touches a number of key policing activities: stop, search while in custody. But the guidance has been pretty clear, actually, about biological sex being applied, and the circumstances in which an officer can't be compelled to search somebody. There might be a lawful requirement to do it. So we've worked through all of that. We've provided guidance internally across NYP, so we'll remain compliant with the law.
Which was a question on rural and wildlife crime, and it was an update from the deputy following discussions with the CPS on securing prosecutions. Joe, could I reach out to you?
Oh, there we go. I don't have a further update on the update that's been sent to panel in writing, but we will follow up and get an update through to panel as quickly as we can. Yes, sorry, that was a long delay in order to just say yes, we are, and we'll update panel as soon as we've got the information for the panel member that raised it. I think it was Councillor Pavlovic, was it, from memory? Yeah.
Any members? Do you know, this is going to be really irritating, and I apologise. It goes off when somebody else speaks. Chris, it would be ideal if it did, but it doesn't work that way. Any members want to raise any questions on any of the questions that we've raised? Thank you. I'll now move on to item 7, public questions or statements to the panel and none received. So I will move on to item 8, members' questions.
Hey, okay. Thank you, Chair. I mean, apologies, obviously, I'm not usually on this committee, but I had just a really general question, because I have been a member of this authority and one of the districts for a long time. Obviously, the combining of fire and police at the time it was done was, well, relatively controversial, but also very new. And sort of now we're a few years down the line. I know there are issues, there have been budgetary issues. I've kept an overview of what's been happening, but I just wondered if at this point there's any kind of verdict on how that's working. Is the jury still out? I know there was a hope that
Thanks, Councillor Davis. So, yes, I think North Yorkshire was one of the first areas to combine the Police and Crime Commissioner role with fire. Certainly, obviously, I've never known it in any other. Our place here in York, North Yorkshire.
Have indeed, and I think the green light's working, which is amazing. I've given Joe prior notice of this, so hopefully there may be some stats at the end of it. Okay, should be on, Peter. So both the fire and police services operate across an area in which there are a large number of railway crossings with barriers which are obviously often down, preventing crossing traffic for safety reasons. Anecdotal evidence suggests that often emergency vehicles are stopped at these barriers, sometimes for some time, whilst the trains pass through the barriers. The crossing in Starbeck at the edge of my Kingsley ward often has large tailbacks both ways to Harrogate and to Knaresborough on both sides of the barrier. Does either the fire service or police service collate information as to when their vehicles are delayed in emergency situations, obviously? And if so, is it possible to see those statistics? I'd be particularly interested in the Starbeck crossing, obviously.
Apologies. So I understand that this is an issue that's been raised at panel previously, and obviously would be an issue for any blue light services in any part of the region where there is a crossing in place. I'll have to, I'm afraid that I didn't have enough notice to be able to get information for you for today. I'll happily look again at whether or not either this is being collated or whether there is a way of getting that information to you. But I can't foresee that it's A, not an issue for every blue light service, or B, that there is a way around it other than services navigating around with the technology that allows you to plan an alternative route.
If I could just quickly follow up. Yeah, the technology is the issue, because I'm told at Starbeck the barriers go down when a certain button is pressed in Harrogate at the signal office there, but obviously that's quite a distance to Starbeck. And apparently there is a more up-to-date method where something on the train could send that message to the barrier operator. And I'm just trying to get if it is a problem for the emergency services, would the Deputy Mayor get behind a campaign to actually improve that technology if it can be done?
I'll have to come back to you in writing. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Deputy Mayor, you'll be aware at the last meeting we asked you this question about police officers in York Hospital with people they are taking in custody there and accompanying. We
Ultimately, I think this is about pressure on the NHS, particularly an A&E, and how we alleviate that pressure rather than it being something that we would regulate through a kind of policing environment. But the Deputy Chief Constable may have something else to add to that. Please, this one sits on.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, the Deputy Mayor's quite right about being heavily regulated, and there's probably nothing more concerning for the public and obviously devastating for families when you bring someone with medical vulnerabilities into custody and then something happens to them. So we have a significant duty of care to people who come into custody. It shouldn't be forgotten that we've got healthcare professionals already working on site in custody to be able, if you like, to triage and to offer medication, advice and care without needing then to take somebody to hospital. But where someone comes in with an injury, or for example, there's an indication that they may have swallowed drugs or be under the heavy influence of drugs that might affect their health longer term, there's no option. We have to take them into that healthcare setting. And what the public might not see, then a number of those people are admitted to a ward. And if they're under arrest for serious offences, an officer will remain with them. So I think it's reflective of some of the vulnerabilities of the people that North Yorkshire Police deal with, both on a health and mental health perspective. We've no option. We have to make sure they get access to high quality medical care, and we have a great relationship with health colleagues who I know will do everything they can to make sure that people aren't there longer than they need to be.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Going back to the railways and railway crossings, I understand the rail policy that if there's any problem at all with any crossing, it's closed to the road and not the rail. And I actually live on a crossing right by it, and I've seen it over the years. And I also understand that it's not purely for safety reasons. To help. Is there a strategy of meeting with Network Rail to try and ensure that when there is a problem, and the previous question about Knaresborough, I think, and other places, and there is a really significant problem in sort of, say, for example, between York and Scarborough, where there are lots of crossings, and some of those crossings, there is no easy route or quick route for an ambulance or a police car to get through if the barrier is down. I think it's an important issue because it affects the communities which are served by the road and the rail. And when we talk about ambulance and fire and the police, we're talking about three services which need usually to get there quickly. And I would ask the Deputy Lord Mayor if you could have a look at the strategy, if there is one, on how that is approached. I'm not expecting an answer now, Deputy Lord Mayor, because I appreciate it's not come.
The unintended consequence of a better train service, for example, to the coast, which I know that is something that the mayor is working on, would be that potentially would be a problem that would be increased going forward. So therefore, it's certainly worth us identifying whether or not there is an issue at the moment with crossings and emergency response. It feels to me like it might require a series of things to be happening at the same time, which actually might mean it's less likely to be happening than maybe some panel members anecdotally think it might be. But I think let's get the data and look at that before we jump to any conclusions about whether or not further changes are needed. If you want
to. Thank you. I'd be interested in, I noticed, Councillor, that your email talks around anecdotal evidence, if there's something that has very specifically been raised within your areas. Certainly. Is that better? My dulcet tones. So from a fire perspective, our strategy is to reduce attendance times wherever possible. And you'll note within the report that we've had the largest reduction of any English fire record.
effectiveness, efficiency, and people at NYFRS. This is an opportunity for the panel to reflect and comment on the outcomes of the report with the Deputy Mayor. It seems overall a really positive report, and I would like to congratulate the Chief and his team for the excellent progress that has actually been made. Would you, first of all, Joe, like to speak to the report?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing this report to come into the papers for today. Clearly, a really important inspection for the service. Huge thanks to Jonathan Dyson, the Chief Fire Officer, and the wider leadership team in North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service, but also all the staff and firefighters across the region who were all part of the team who would have met with inspectors when they were here a few months ago. And just a real, huge progress that's been made since the last inspection. And also, given that she's in the room, thanks to my predecessor as the Commissioner, Zoe Metcalfe, because actually a lot of this work took place a long time ago. And the determination really is, A, that we've got this far, but also that this is now a direction of travel for the future so that we have the best fire and rescue service in the country going forwards, notwithstanding the challenges that the service always is going to face, which we were just talking about in part when we're talking about response times.
For the support that we've had. You'll remember, for those that sat on my appointments committee a couple of years ago, one of the key principles that I said that we would do within this service was to go back to basics, to review our statutory functions and build from there. And I
the question. So I'll bring the fire chief in. I suppose all I would say is that this is a work in progress, and it is something that the community risk management plan consultation, which goes live today, is going to look at, is around
Right. It's good when technology fails for everybody, because normally it's just me on my own. So yeah, on page 53, I just noted it commented about the impact of the changes to becoming a combined authority and how that had delayed some implementation. Around duty systems and things. So I just wondered what assurances the Deputy Mayor could give us that impact of all those changes, is that coming to an end? Has it come to an end? Or are we still feeling that impact of things not happening as quickly as the service would like?
Sorry. Yeah, so apologies. I mean, I can't really comment on what I walked into. I walked into a situation where things hadn't already been agreed. But for me, this is about, you don't want to make decisions and impose things on people. You want to do things with people. So certainly the CRMP that's going live today is about that. It's a consultation around doing things with people. And certainly the changes that have been introduced in Harrogate, which I went to Harrogate Police Station a couple of weeks ago, just before the changes went live. Actually, people at Harrogate were pretty content. The watch I spoke to when I was there were in a good place in terms of the new system. And that for me was about us making sure that we were doing things with people, and that the changes that were being introduced were evidence-based, and that they were going to work and reflect the risks, as I'm sure the fire chief will say, the risks at the point at which those changes are being introduced. And that's the reason that those risks are assessed regularly. and the community risk management plan will be for the next 4 years, which is going live at the moment. And that consultation that will look at the risks for the next 4 years, but we have to stay alive to those risks potentially changing, and then us being able to respond to that strategically at that point, and ensure that we've got resources in place to respond to the risks as they sit at that particular point and with what we're told at the time. So I think it's more important that we've got a resolution now that people are broadly content with, and that is working and keeping people safe.
Great question. Thank you. I think what's important to reflect here is that the report conflates a number of ultimately very difficult and challenging situations within there. There is an overarching point there that the HMI do point to. The change in governance wasn't the delay. The delay was in the trade unions waiting for the change in governance and wouldn't come to the table to negotiate. Now that brings a difficulty because I either then, with the Deputy Mayor, impose imposition of a duty system would potentially bring industrial action and therefore lose the workforce in what you're trying to do. Because you'll note at the bottom, it does say the service should work with the union representatives to finalise future working arrangements. We are doing. We've delivered people-centric change. We avoided the imposition, and then the Deputy Mayor and I then reached agreement with the trade unions on moving forward. The reports have to be written in a certain way, and that way was therefore, it couldn't necessarily go into the detail I just provided there. But now we have the trade unions, we're working with them, we delivered, and the Harrogate changes went live at the beginning of the week. Thank you.
Oh, okay. I can shout anyway, but mine, Chair, are really kind of, there were 3 issues that I picked up, and forgive me, I came to this late in the day as a sub. For me, I'm really encouraged to stuff about staff. That, I mean, reading that 22 report, my chin just hit the floor. It was awful, just the general feeling that was coming through of negativity across almost everything. So I'm really pleased that you've taken the staff with you. I think you were right to wait until it was the right time to do it rather than impose. It would have been another nightmare for you to have to deal with, and you've got enough. I just wanted to ask really just generally about things like, do you use appraisals properly within the service? To me, they are all, I've managed big teams. Do you think you have a good system around that? That's my first question. The other one was really, it is about data. If you talk about data, there's a lot of data. I have the same issue with the information we get from the police. As a councillor, I get this huge spreadsheet that goes from stage to stage, thousands of boxes with months to do it and about it. Absolutely useless. And so when I first became a councillor, I kind of said, you know what, how does anybody use this? And I think of the 15 councillors I spoke to, it was and it's I just thought, this is a complete waste of time. And from my knowledge and experience, that data needs to be translated into management information that allows you to actually then make those decisions and it will drive those decisions. So I don't know how you feel about that. Because certainly in terms of the police sector, what I said, actually is not, I can't believe that the chief constable is looking at this. If he is, then we'll never do anything else. So I think it's more about the information that comes to us as councillors. But that seems to me to be a bit of a gap, and it seems to be a bit true in your service as well. And the third point, again, from the management point of view, is the failings around the complaint system. To me, that was always a main driver for improving your service. And if you have on top of that,
Yes.
They've given me this, but putting together of things isn't quite what I'm used to, but those 2 points, if you put
Yeah. Sorry, Chair, if I may just briefly on the HR functions. So one of the reasons why we looked at the precept in the way that we did was because we knew, even though we've already, this progress is obviously extremely welcome, we also knew that in order to sustain things for the longer term, you need systems and back office functionality to be able to support the staff on the front line. And that was one of the issues that had been one of the consequences of not having had a sufficiently funded fire service for a long period of time. And the reason we looked at the precept was in order that actually those foundations are now being, we can now put more investment into those backroom foundations in order that staff on the front line can be better supported, the equipment can come in, and all those kind of things that people need to feel valued when they're at work, which I completely agree with you is incredibly important. So I'll bring the fire chief in on that wider in terms of operationally what that's going to mean going forward with the precept increase. But just on the data point, I suppose what I would, as the panel know, I like to draw people's attention to is the online public meetings that we have every month, because actually the data packs that go into those online public meetings are a really more concise and useful form of data that I think is something that is more digestible probably for a wider public audience. So I just would urge panel members, if they're not already doing so, to look at those packs that go to that go to the online public meetings. So it will be a police meeting this coming month, is the next one, and then it'll be fire the month after that. So we alternate the meetings, but the packs are available regardless of whether you watch the meeting. You can look at the data in the pack anyway. But those data sources, I do think, are more digestible. And then, yes, on the complaints point, it's probably better taken when we look at that report specifically later in the meeting, if that's all right. But I'll just see if the fire chief wants to come in on the HR points.
Thank you. And I completely agree with you on the PDRs. Personal development reviews, they shouldn't just be a tick box exercise, which is why we've revolutionised it. We've gone away from just having a large bureaucratic form where people would talk through. We engaged with staff, we gave them forums, and they have now helped us co-design a personal development review and record form, which ultimately focus on not just what they want to deliver, but who they want to be at the end of the year through personal development or otherwise, because that's the part that leadership delivers within the service. So we're also the only service which runs a strengths-based promotion processes, which has multiple persons on multiple panels, but ultimately it's down through core leadership principles. It's not just whether you're good at firefighting, it's in the whole aspects of the person. So I think we're in a much better position. There's always more to do. But compared to where we were, we have a human-centric experience now of people going through their development reviews, as opposed to we just need to do this once a year, which ties me into the data. Data's brilliant, and I love data, but data needs to tell a human story. So we now have dashboards which are accessible in service, which presents it in a more pictorial form so people can understand it. Data's useless if you can't understand the meaning of what it is, and that's what we've delivered now. Thank you.
I'm on. I have two questions, if I may, Chair, through you. First of all, on page 57 of the report, if I can just comment on, HMI has given an adequate to making the fire service affordable now and in the future. And probably just ask through the Deputy Mayor, will the Mayor be considering making any further investment for example, upgrading the estate and the IT systems through the Mayor?
Oh, there you go, it's gone green. So just on the sickness point, so there is obviously, it says in the report, there obviously is an absence policy, but I think some of this is also about us ensuring that we demonstrate how much we appreciate the work that on-call firefighters are doing. We're heavily dependent on on-call firefighters across North Yorkshire. So making sure that, again, through the combined authority, we're making sure that those appreciations are demonstrated, and also that we recognise how flexible some of our on-call firefighters need to be. So whether or not we can improve those workplace conditions, to just pick up on your previous point again, workplace conditions, so that if they're doing other work during the day, they might be able to do that from a fire station, for example, particularly if we've been able to put in some investment into that station to make that possible, that would be really positive. But also just, again, making staff feel appreciated and valued in their workplace, which is about that HR investment, and making sure that people feel like the training and support is there across the service. But I'll bring the chief in on the operational side.
This is a strategic issue, and it's one that we've been working through. So the core principles are, we have a number of staff which are absent. What we've seen a significant increase recently upon is in the long-term sickness. Now, this is always the point. I know the HMI says in some areas that we're excessive in how much we support people. That's a very difficult position, because on one hand, then you're challenged saying you're not being supportive enough as opposed to being supported. The point on policies is exactly right. Well, this is representation of where we went through the initial support services and the challenges we had. We didn't have enough HR.
Thank you, Chair. Also, would want to welcome the improvements that have been outlined in the inspection report. On page 43, the report talks about a new tool of dynamic mobilising and cover that's being used in fire control. And so I'm just looking for a little bit more understanding on what that looks like and how it works. If you had any examples of the use of dynamic mobilising, and if you could give assurance that redeployments aren't routine, I guess is the way that I'd put it. So if you've got any examples of the types of redeployments that tool comes up with, and if you did have any data on redeployments, for example, how many in a year you have, that would be useful but not essential. Okay, thank you.
The data, the easiest thing is probably that we come back to you if you want to submit a specific request around those deployments, and we can look for that information and come back to you on it. But I'll bring the Fire Chief on the specifics of the report.
Thank you. So the dynamic cover tool. So this is effectively a large electronic map of the county, which allows us to immediately see where all our appliances are, and the attendance times within the publicly consulted times, whether we are meeting them or not. It tells us where all the reefs are and all of the incidents. It's brilliant. When we go back to the data, it humanises the data on there. Now, when we talk around redeployments, are you talking around appliances or people, please, Councillor?
People.
Okay, so there are two issues there. We have discussed this in panel before. The use of moving firefighters around the county to provide cover in different areas is a national model and has been in far longer than I've been in the service. So that's a normal mechanism of what we do. The new dynamic cover tool allows everybody to have access to the current state of the organisation at any given time. And it makes more intelligent decisions for our control staff because they can see where to move appliances to maintain the consulted upon attendance times. It's part of our journey. There are further data centres that we can purchase to go into this equipment. And again, that will help us maintain that the appropriate fire cover. Again, Councillor, I know you've committed to meeting to discuss these things. If you would like to take me up on the offer, then once again, I'm more than happy to go through in detail. Thank you.
Just one for you specifically. I noticed just now you referred to an answer to a question during the questionnaire from my colleagues who look at the data in the public meetings. Now, I commend your public meetings because I think they're vital for the community of North Yorkshire, the people of North Yorkshire, to have the opportunity to hear from you and ask you questions. But I think I would like to see, and I know some of my colleagues, if not all of them, share this view, is that this is a statutory panel with statutory duties and statutory powers. And it is our duty to oversee, on a strategy point of view, your strategy with the Chief Constable and the Fire Officer. And I think it would help that if the data packs you're talking about when you're answering the questions, although obviously it is publicly available and it's available to anybody, a member of the public, I think it's not very helpful to expect, I don't mean this in a critical way, but for the panel to look always at data packs in all the public meetings. Some of my colleagues attend many meetings as councillors. It comes with a job, as do you. And I would welcome a system whereby if you anticipate there's going to be questions on where data, because data, of course, is key. Data with context informs strategy and where the strategy is going and how it's working. Whether it's liaising with our chair or Dan Parsons, and it would help you, I suppose, if more written questions were made as well, because I think that's one way forward. That's where the panel should help you, is that you would know to be able to provide those data packs for the panel with the papers. I mean, the papers are enormous, of course. I think my pack is over 160 pages long. I've read it twice. I'm still sort of ploughing through it again. So it's really a request, can we find a way where data packages that are available in other sources are actually put in the source to the panel?
So what I was going to suggest was that, I mean, I'm very happy to include the data if that's what the panel would like. So perhaps it's something for us to take away and discuss with the chair what is going to be of most use to the panel. Equally, if the panel ever have questions about patterns or trends that are the kinds of issues that are covered in those data packs, provided they're provided in advance, we'll always make sure that we provide that data to panel either in the meeting or in advance of the meeting, if that's helpful. So if there are particular crime types, for example, that you want to monitor the trends in, I know that certainly the crime type that the Mayor and I are focused on, because it was going in the wrong direction, was retail crime, and that was something that we were looking at in quite a lot of detail. But there'll be other issues that panel quite rightly would want to raise with me, I'm very happy to ensure that we provide that data to you either at panel or outside of panel, either through those data packs or with something separately that we would provide you in answer to a specific question. So or we can just provide you with the panel data, the data packs.
Yes, I make it clear, Joe, it is partly, it is a two-way thing, and the panel, I'm sure, can help you by having more written questions beforehand, because we get this pack from our scrutiny officer fairly early in time, and we're chased by Diane to make sure that if we've got a written question, like Chris had his too, and that will help. But thank you very much for that, and I think it would be a good way forward. I don't think I'm a lone voice. Well, I know I'm not a lone voice, but I think it would be a welcome thing. So thank you.
Oh, it's gone green straight away.
Super duper. This isn't lost on us at all, and I completely agree. I can't tell my staff that I appreciate them and value them and what they're doing, and then ask them to work in.
Okay, so thank you for the report, and can we welcome the significant improvements that have been made, and we look forward to further updates as progress have been made. So thank you very much. I'll move on to agenda.
Maybe, yes. Great, thank you, Chair. And thanks for those words of introduction. And I know, because I've spoken to some panel members, how appreciated it was that there was the separate briefing for panel members. Certainly, panel are part of the community that the neighbourhood policing teams are there to serve. So therefore, ensuring that you're able to also understand a lot of the thinking that went behind that neighbourhood policing review, I think was really positive. For me, this is, you know, it's been fortuitous timing that it coincided with my first year in post, that this review has taken place at the same time. For me, it's also about a balance between building public confidence in policing again, which we know had dropped in the past. And for me, that's also about empowering those neighbourhood teams to be the source of all of that intelligence from their local communities, whether they're in a rural area or in the middle of a city, actually making sure that those neighbourhood teams across the region are empowered to pass that local intelligence up and ensure that we're
Yeah, thank you. Maybe grateful for the thanks to the pre-brief. We thought that was a really valuable thing to do because it just allowed a lot of questions and natural interest and curiosity, I think, into how the force has got to the position we've got to with neighbourhood policing more broadly. It's interesting looking through the papers, actually, the confirmation hearing of the Chief Constable last year. I think
you for this significant report. The report was really helpful. The panel will probably want to revisit once the further work has been undertaken on the CHP model, and once communities have seen the benefits of the visible local policing. So thank you very much for that report. I intend to take a 10-minute break here, members. We'll try and sort the microphones. So if we could be back for what time?
12:15.
Yep, 12:15. Thank. It does look like the microphone's working. Chair, thank you for the report. Following the HI inspection of NYP's integrity arrangement early this year, we were keen to get a better overview of the handling of police complaints in both the PFC team and within professional standards. As mentioned previously, I have also had concerns that we've had an increased number of individuals contacting the panel because they are frustrated about a lack of response or timeliness of response to complaints. In addition to some issues around length of time to complete the adjudication process. The panel is seeking assistance around the measures that are being or have been put in place to put things on a more sustainable footing. Deputy Mayor, would you like to take us through this report?
Thank you, Chair. Just for context, when I started in my role a year ago, the inspectors, I think, were in my first week in my role this time last year, and this was something that I kind of came into and was the reason that I probably started out my first conversations around the complaints team were in the context of the fact the inspectors were in. We didn't actually know what the outcome of the inspection was at that point. I would just draw panel's attention to the national context around some of this. So this is a problem for other police forces across the country. Certainly when I talk to police and crime commissioner colleagues across the country, it is something that is a very live issue for other people. Obviously, we are only two force areas in the country that has the Model 3 arrangements currently. But interestingly, talking to some colleagues in other areas, it is something that other PCCs are looking at because they're concerned about their own levels of oversight that they get under the other models that are available. But just in the terms of this report and the inspection report and where we're at now compared to where we were a year ago, I really just wanted to draw panel's attention to the enormous progress that's been made over the last 12 months compared to where we were. It's hugely significant in terms of being on top of what is coming through the front door, and then just knowing what those issues are that we need to be flagging to North Yorkshire Police. I wanted to pay tribute to Mark, Ayres and the team, particularly the complaints team who I went to see a week or so ago, for all their work in actually bringing down that backlog. It's been incredibly challenging for them, but actually, despite the numbers of things coming through the door remaining largely consistent, actually they've managed to get on top of what was a backlog, so let's not pretend that it wasn't. It was a backlog, but actually they've got on top of it, and actually I think the systems that are now in place do provide much more assurance, hopefully, to panel. If it's okay, I was going to ask Mark if he would just talk panel through the process at the moment, so people who are wanting to make a complaint about the police service or the fire and rescue service, what that process actually is, and then if it's okay, because the Deputy Chief is here, just a little bit around the professional standards side from the police as well. But just, you know, at the same time as I know the complaints team from a police, fire and crime team perspective have done a really amazing job over the last 12 months. I know that there are similar improvements that are taking place on the professional standards side, which I'm sure the Deputy Chief Constable can also talk to. But this is really welcome progress. We recognise that there were some real challenges in the inspection report, notwithstanding that actually other police force areas are facing similar challenges from their own inspections in this area as well. Notwithstanding that, we obviously still want to be the best in the country, and so therefore this is a work in progress for us. And then just finally, before I ask Mark just to talk through the process itself, just really to draw people's attention to the review process that's in place, because that is something that going forward will be something that we're looking at, because that is a growing area of demand for the service, and has resource implications as well, which we're looking at. But just to draw panel's attention finally just to the broad numbers, since we were talking about data earlier, the bottom of page 99, this time last year, 667 cases, which is completely unacceptable backlog in the system of nearly a year. But now we're at 151 and no case is older than a few weeks old. So we're just trying to get on top of that now further, but actually that is significant progress on where we were a year ago, and that we're intending to continue that progress over the coming months. But I'll just bring Mark in on the process just so that panel understand that before we take questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you and good morning. Yeah, so just in terms of, to pick up what Joe just said, we've got 151 new cases. The oldest case goes back to March last year. This year, apologies. We rewind a year ago, though the backlog was at 9 to 10 months. Yeah, of course, is that better? Yeah, okay, thank you. So in terms of how complaints are handled, all complaints come into the Deputy Mayor's office. They can come in via telephone, emails, letters, single online home, or we have the odd person that would like to make a complaint in person, and we'll arrange a date and time for them to come in and speak to a member of the team. When the complaint comes in, it's assessed on the day or no later than 2 working days in accordance with the IOPC guidance and threshold. At that point there, we're looking, for example, is there any misconduct or serious misconduct? Are there any criminal behaviours or behaviours where we need to refer the matter to North Yorkshire Police's Professional Standards Department? In those cases, all those cases are progressed to the Professional Standards Department within 2 working days. Can be slightly longer if we're waiting for some information back from the claimant. For instance, we might need some consent from them. We also do a check as well for, is there any threat, risk or harm, and those cases are also assigned to a case advisor within two working days. So for the urgent stuff, I just want to give an assurance that those cases are sent and progressed within 2 working days. It's what you'd class as the local resolution, non-urgent cases that have been caught up in our queue system, and they're cases for where we're looking to resolve them informally by what we call local resolutions. That might be working with the complainant to provide them with an update, give them some guidance, or support them in getting an outcome from North Yorkshire Police. As moving forwards, I think we realised from HMIC FRS inspection that we needed to look at that queue and how it's being managed. So we've now put processes in place where myself and the customer service manager are dip sampling what is in the queue at the moment to make sure that none of those cases that are sitting as local resolution don't need to be progressed to professional standards. Dip sample results are positive and no cases have been highlighted since we've been dip sampling of those that are 4 cases that should have gone through to the professional standards team. And then in terms of how we progress the complaint, we will work with North Yorkshire Police and the local commands to actually progress the complaint. We look for an outcome within 28 days. Whilst the IOPC don't actually specify how long we should keep a case for when it's at informal or local resolution, 28 days seems to fit quite well. That gives us an opportunity to work with our colleagues in North Yorkshire Police, work with the customer to understand what the allegation is, what the outcome is, and what they're looking for as a suitable resolution. In terms of stats, service resolution is around 70% at the moment. So of the complaints that are coming in, we're able to recover informally 70%. And I think that that is really helpful for both, not only for the police, but also from a complainant's point of view as well, because we're not tied to the formal guidance, we can work with the complainant to something that is suitable for them. Like I say, that's at 70% at the moment. So of the 1,500 cases that are coming in each year, 70% of those are dealt with by my team.
I don't know whether the Deputy Chief Constable wants to just come in on the professional standards side of things before we take questions, or do you want to wait for questions?
I'll wait.
All right, yeah.
I'm going to ask the first questions. What steps are being taken to improve the ways in which the forces embeds learning from professional standards?
I'll start if that's okay. So one of the reasons why this was so troubling to have such a backlog is that it was meaning that the opportunities for learning were being missed potentially, because it meant that the themes or any issues for particular teams or particular areas of the force weren't going to be flagged at an early enough point for that learning to happen in a timely way. Obviously, if we're on top of the backlog, we can be on top of the learning much more than we were before, which is why it's so welcome that we're in a much better position than we were a year ago. But I don't know whether the Deputy Chief wants to just come in on the specifics, given that the professional standards side of it sits within the force. That's it.
That's it. Right. Yeah, worth taking back right to the beginning about the importance of organisational learning in an organisation being outstanding. So you will have heard the strong ambition for us to be outstanding, which is why this was so critical. We knew that the integrity inspection would be problematic in this regard, but the decision some years ago to split the responsibility around complaints has led us that position, really, and it's fair, and the Deputy Mayor will bear this out. There's been some fairly robust discussions between the force and the office in terms of how that comes across to us. Needless to say, with the work that Mark and the team have done and the scrutiny over it, I think we're in a much healthier position now. It's not just about reducing the backlog, though. It's about the understanding and insight of why people are complaining about the service that North Yorkshire Police give us, and who they are complaining about, and what some of those behaviours look like. So there's now a dashboard performance framework been developed with Mark's team that straddles both organisations. So you'll have heard people talk about dashboards before. The data is available in terms of what the nature of the complaints are, who might be repeatedly being complained about, where. So geographically in the force, where might we not be getting it quite right? So it is about taking that learning more formally. We've got an organisational learning board as a force. So the key issues that are picked up through the thematics that are drawn out of the complaint data feed into that board, where we can then either derive new process or provide advice to officers and staff about what's better received by a complainant or a victim or someone who contacts North Yorkshire Police. That's the more org learning side. Once they come across to the force under what we call Schedule 3, which is an indication of misconduct, not necessarily, it's an indication on the facts, because the regulations around misconduct require that you can't go beyond a certain point and investigate without the protections that those regulations provide. So once there's an indication of misconduct, they come across the PSD for a more formal assessment and an investigation. And if the information's there that indicates that there is misconduct, that will then go into a formal investigation in professional standards by professional standards investigators. So the proportion of those a minute, we've about 112 complaints sat within PSD. Now, not all of those will be misconduct, but they might be the more serious complaints that's more difficult to resolve. That's too many in terms of live. So we've taken a decision that there's a dedicated team being brought together. We've already got an inspector dedicated to complaints management within PSD. Currently, some of those complaints will go out to the geographic areas for resolution. It's got to be an inspector rank or above that does that. that oversees it. That's what the regulations say, or within certain functions. So, for example, the force control room, if it's not one of our geographic commands. But it's really important we have oversight and consistency about how those complaints are being resolved. So there's also a small team being wrapped around that inspector, and our view is that we would rather deal with all those centrally once we've got that team built and the capability in place, rather than going out to the commands or elsewhere. So that's the position we're in. We're in a much better position than we were. We understand exactly what's on the books, where it is, and we're starting to resolve those in a more meaningful way. But it'll be a work in progress through the rest of this year.
Woohoo! Amazing. I'm a little bit confused, and I don't know if Dan can help with this. You might be able to. Dan's kindly provided us with some stats from the IOPC, the Independent Office for Police Conduct, on complaints logged and average time to be dealt with. And I think, Dan, that these were in a report from March, and they're an annual, or am I wrong in that? Is it the last quarter?
Yes, they were the latest quarter reports, but giving the last 12 months.
The last 12 months, but to March 2025. Am I right there? To March? It's not the last few months, it's they finish in March.
Yeah, to end of March
okay,
this year.
thank you,
Sorry,
thank you. Which is what you've just said. You've probably tried to address. Well, you probably are addressing these, but it's the time it takes to contact complainants on these figures. I just think it's gobsmacking, actually. So bearing in mind it's last year, March to March, as I read this, the average time nationally was 9 days. The most significant most similar force, 24 days. The same period last year, so that would be the year before, 25 days for this force, presumably. But in that year, the time taken, average, not just the time taken, but the average. So for it to be an average, there must be some a lot more than this. 56 working days to contact complainants. That's double the most similar force. And when you look at the average working days to log complaints, that's even worse. That's most similar force is 22. The same period last year is 39. It was 63 working days, the average. That is, I hope you agree, that is unacceptable. And I hope
so I'll probably let Mark answer that.
Right, because that's why I'm confused, because that doesn't tie in at all with which.
Can I just clarify? Are you talking about a report that isn't this report? Because
no, it's not in the report. It's.
Yeah, no, but I don't have it in front of me. So you're talking about something that isn't in the papers for this meeting.
No, Diane's briefed the panel. She briefs us with lots of information outside the reports we get.
But you're asking me a question about data that we haven't got sight of here.
Well,
I might have to come back to you.
So one of the questions is why you haven't got that data then, Joe?
Well, I'm sure you do.
If I was in your position, I would be worried you're not being told those stats, because double the most similar force is not acceptable. I accept it's probably moved on since then. You know, we're now in July. That was March.
Just to reassure you, Councillor Aldred, Mark and I are meeting with the IOPC on a regular basis about the performance of the complaints team, but also about where the best practice is across the country and where we need to be enhancing the performance of the team. It's not hugely helpful to have data presented here that isn't in the papers for the meeting, although I'm very happy to look at it outside the meeting. Just to reassure you, we are reviewing this, that we are monitoring the performance of the complaints team on a very regular basis. It's a standing item because it's on the risk register for the Strategic Oversight Board meetings that we have on a monthly basis between both my office and the police, in terms of ensuring that we're monitoring performance across both areas. And we're meeting with the IOPC to ensure that we're also on top of best practice across both most similar forces and other forces, to ensure that we're positioning ourselves for the longer term. Like I said, a year ago, we were in a dreadful position in terms of this service. So one of the reasons that some of those delays will be what they appear to be in that report will be because there was that huge backlog a year ago that we've been working through. As it says in this report, which I can talk to, is 11 months ago, there was an 11-month wait for some reports, for some people a year ago. So therefore, that doesn't surprise me that those delays are in the IOPC report in that way. But equally, I don't think that's the accurate picture now, because actually that is not where the team are at now. I don't know whether Mark has anything else he can add to that. You want to come in, Mark? Yeah.
Yeah, so just to pick up, a year ago, we did have 667 cases, and that would have impacted the length to the first point of contact and the delay. You'd expect to see for this coming year the numbers significantly reduce. We are working with the IOPC, and I think what we've also said in the report is we've gone from 2 advisors to 4 advisors on the team. We've got a 5th advisor that's due to start shortly, and so we will have some resilience in that team moving forward. And the first part of the process, which we're responsible for, will actually help reduce that figure and support North Yorkshire Police in what they need to do when the complaint goes forward.
Perhaps I should be asking Mark why those figures aren't in the report that we're looking at now.
They are the historic figures, and we've put in the current figures for this year.
And you do agree those are not acceptable?
I agree.
An average of 56 days to get back to a complainant is not acceptable.
Yeah, that was our starting point, was that we completely accepted that. The first thing I said is that I walked in a year ago when the inspectors were in. The situation at that point was unacceptable. It's been a focus of work. It's on the risk register. We're monitoring it every month because we thought it was unacceptable. We're in a much better position now. We will continue to monitor it and continue to talk to the IOPC about best practice across the country. This is a challenge in other forces as well as in North Yorkshire. But that doesn't mean that we're accepting of the position that we're in. We're continuing to invest in
national average is 9 days. 54 was the average. Yeah, okay.
I think what we've agreed is we will share the document you're referring to with the Deputy Mayor and ask for a written response in that space. Malcolm?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a question about context in relation to complaints. I'm just intrigued about out of the number of complaints that come through the Office of Police in Fire and Crime from members of the public. Obviously, you deal with the vast majority of them. They're informally resolved or dealt with to your satisfaction, or the member of the public's satisfaction. Just, and you may not have these figures down, what percentage of those complaints are deemed so serious or meet a criteria for investigation by the Professional Standards Department? I'm just interested as to sort of what percentage then has to go across for formal investigation by North Yorkshire Police.
Just to draw your attention to page 96. So one of the advantages, I suppose, to being in a Model 3 is that the complaints team sits within my office, which means that actually everything comes through the front door of our office, and then it is triaged through that. Now, if the system's working well, then that works well. Just to draw your attention, actually, a lot of those complaints will be people asking for updates. It's why investing in communication back to victims of crime is really important, so that people aren't coming via our office to ask for an update, because actually those systems are working better across the piece. The second most likely is around timely contact, which is, similarly to chasing an update. And then the third most common complaint allegation is around minor incivilities. I'll let Mark come in around the kind of thresholds for the Schedule 3 complaints that would be going to professional standards and the volumes of those. But I'll let you come in on the volumes, because actually it's not in the report.
So in terms of the volumes, I don't have the exact number with me, but so those new complaints that meet the threshold to go straight to professional standard are relatively low. And if you'd like the data, we can arrange for that to be shared with panel members. Yeah.
I think it's worth saying that's an indication. So not all of them, once they've been investigated, will end up in a formal misconduct outcome. It just means that the team in the OPFCC can resolve it at the first point of contact.
Thank you, Chair. Deputy Mayor, thank you for the report and assurance of your current ways of working and changes that you've made. I've got a specific complaint that I'm obliged to raise and ask you to look at from receiving correspondence from Haxby Town Council, who have written to myself and Councillor Pavlovic to ask about their complaints about North Yorkshire Police, and they have made me aware that they've not received a reply, and one of their cases is over 12 months old. So I'd ask you to go look if you could. I've received a formal letter from them, so I have consent to send that to you, so I'll do that.
Can I have met with Haxby Town Council. I think it was probably around January of this year. So I did go to a meeting. If it was an antisocial behaviour meeting that I went to with the town council. I'm very happy. Like I said, I'm going to one with Sherburn and Elmet Parish at the end of this week. If there are particular issues, I'm always happy to go meet with parishes or town councils. Obviously, we will look into that particular written piece of correspondence and we'll come back to you in writing. But I have met with them in person in the last 6 months or so.
That's perfect. Martin, did you have a question? Thank you.
Thank you. Paragraph 14, page 97, is the findings. There's a mistake actually. It says undertaken in July 25. It was of course 24. And I appreciate and take on board that the report is now a year old, and a lot of water has gone under the bridge since then. And I appreciate that Model 3, which I consider to be the very best model, because it gives more public confidence in an independence from the police. As one of my colleagues said, it used to be that it was assumed that the police were marking their own homework. Whether that was correct or not, I can't say. But in the last paragraph, the one that really stood out to me, the delays in initial handling of complaints by the YNCA customer service team was impacting the force. Now, I can see impact on the force because there may be people being suspended, and so you've got less people out doing the policing work, that a police officer who has an allegation against him or her might not perform as well, and it is not to their health detriment, is not to their well-being. But I would very much welcome to know what the impact was at that time, and it may not be answerable today, and what assurance you can have for yourself that that impact, whatever it was, it must have been adverse, how that impact, has it decreased, has it increased? And there may not be very hard figures, but obviously for it to be mentioned very specifically, I think it's important. And if I go on to, I notice in paragraph 35 of that report about the new governance checks, I still, I may have missed something, but I can't quite see at the moment how you have the assurance about the level of improvement. And if I can take it to, for example, the one I've just mentioned, and of course, if you can, I'd like to know what that assurance is, how you feel about the assurance that you have that it's really changing things. And I appreciate, as the Deputy Chief said, it's work in progress, and an amazing amount of work has been done by your team, with Mark and by the police. But I would like to have more assurance that you feel yourself that it's going forward, so you can assure us.
Thank you, Martin. I think the most concerning issue would have been if there had been cases that should have been prosecuted, which for whatever reason hadn't had ended up, a police officer made a decision that there wasn't a case. Someone makes a complaint about that. Maybe there should have been, maybe there shouldn't have been. But if it's going through a complaints process and then ends up in a queue, that is not an acceptable service to the public. And that would be certainly one of the most concerning elements, that if it was being missed, was one of the reasons that we were so concerned about the delays at the door, if you like. And then the other part of that, I think, which is also again worrying in terms of public confidence, would be around learning. And actually, if you've got any issues that really were about the wider need for the force to do something differently or to learn, actually, if those aren't being identified in a timely enough way, that also is unhelpful in terms of the trajectory for the future. So all of it, from my perspective, certainly when I, like I said, the inspectors were in when I started last year. The inspectors were in, it was something I then asked about, because it was obviously I was learning about everything at the same time, but because the inspectors had been, it was something that then had focus, and then obviously we got the results of the inspection report and it had even more focus then. So but I would certainly say that I am assured around us understanding what is now coming through the front door. I think you're right, though, that actually the wider assurance processes around the quality of that response is something that I think it's fair to say that over the last 12 months, we've been focused on the quantities of things and making sure that we're on top of that. And actually, once you get on top of the quantity and the actual numbers coming through, you can then dig into the kind of quality and the in-depth level at which things are being responded to. But it felt particularly important to begin with to ensure that we were on top of the quantity of things coming through the door. And obviously then the next steps are then to have further assurances around the quality of the responses and the way in which people are being dealt with by the team. But again, just to again pay tribute, that is an enormous milestone of work that team have managed to deliver in the last 12 months. And given the pressure that they will have been under over that 12-month period, both the publication of the report itself in January and then the fact that there's been regular requirements for them to report into the Strategic Oversight Board that I chair, has actually put an awful lot of pressure on that team. And actually they've continued to ensure that that front door continues to function and is functioning much better month on month compared to where we were a year ago. So I'm not fully assured, I suppose, is the answer, but I'm much more assured than I would have been if you'd asked me 12 months ago.
Is there a way forward so that you could produce at a future date something that sort of indicated where you are now and how it's got better? And I do come back to the point, I would like to know about the impact. The inspector clearly said there was an impact, it had to be adverse. I'd like to know quite a bit more about that, and I'd like to know whether that impact has been lessened by the work that's been done by the team, or I'm hoping it's going to.
Sorry, Cass, yeah, but impact in the far, I think in that context in the report, what it referenced were things like if the complaint takes months, which at that time it was, to come across to the force, have you still got body worn video available? Probably not. Have you got CCTV available? Probably not. So when you're looking to investigate complaints one way or another, because we do it in a neutral way, obviously, then there might be evidence that might have been available, but then isn't. So we think about witness recollection. If you're further down the line, then that can get distorted. That's just human nature in terms of memory. So I think in that context, that's what it was talking about for specific investigations, in addition to an inability then to derive the organisational learning that we spoke about in the beginning in a meaningful way to prevent further complaints coming in potentially about the same issue. So that was broadly what HMIC were referencing when they mentioned that.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to stop the discussion there. I'm very conscious Joe needs to leave us in the next 5 to 10 minutes. So thank you for that report. And we'll keep an eye on this, and we'll ask that a report's brought back to us and say next 6 to 9 months to look at progress. I'm going to move to item 15, any of the business. I've been notified of one urgent item to raise with the panel, which is around the consultation on community risk management plan. Deputy Mayor, can I ask you or the Chief Fire Officer to briefly uptake the panel, being very conscious of your need to get a train?
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, it was to make panel aware that the consultation around the next community risk management plan is going live this week, and we'll look at the service plans for the fire service for the next 4 years. I'm sure the Chief Fire Officer, given that we have him with us today, can just say a few more words about what that will include. And I would just urge panel to look at that consultation document when it's live, and to make sure that if your communities have particular issues that they want to raise through, that they do so through that consultation or directly through panel.
Thank you, Chair. Community risk management plan. It becomes difficult in the naming conventions. This was the integrated risk management plan. North Yorkshire and the previous leadership called it the risk and resource model. We're now aligning to the national naming convention, which is community risk management plan, CRMP. That is how it will be referred to in the consultation. Now, I think we're about to consult on what is one of the most transparent documents that the county has seen from a fire perspective. There are a large number of areas of focus, which for us tells the public and yourselves, scrutineers, ultimately, what are we focusing on? How are we focusing on that? And how will we deliver those outcomes? And that's massive for us. It also enables the public, from an accountability perspective, when the inspectorate comes in, they will review this document on the next inspection. So there will be third-party appraisal of what we've done and the process that we've undertaken. Now, there are two key principles that we're asking the public through the consultation. One is that we've identified potential efficiencies through not replacing the second water bowser in county when it reaches the end of its operational life. And the second one is to extend the current policy for automatic fire alarms, the false alarm section, to not attend those through 24 hours instead of 12, because that allows greater productivity in training, community intervention, and the workforce generally focusing on the risk that is in the county. Now, that will be released today. Sarah's put all of and thank you to Sarah and Damien for the extensive work they've done on this. That will go into the county today. And again, it's an ask from yourselves and for where you're able to influence within your communities, be able to respond to the survey and ultimately the consultation. Thank you.
I know. Why don't you run for your train? Have you got?
No, no.
Well, I don't know.
Quite big.
Yeah.
Thank you, Diane. So can I move members back to agenda items 12 and 13, which is the draft policing and crime annual report and the draft fire and rescue annual report for 24-25. Members will recall that we have a role to review the MERS draft annual reports and make recommendations. We've been provided with draft reports for both policing and fire. We'll take the policing and crime annual report first. I was going to ask the Deputy Mayor to introduce it, but there would be dead silence. So can we have a discussion amongst ourselves on that? The intention is that Diane has to put together a written response to go into the Mayor's office. Is that correct? Mags, do you want to start?
Thank you. Yeah, so I just have a few observations and comments on it.
Are you talking about the police one?
Police one first.
Thank you.
Yes, police one first. One of them, so page 109, it talks about the areas of improvement between April 23 and April 24, and then it gives a load of data of, different crime rates that come down. I'm not sure if that's a typo, if it's supposed to be, say, between 24 and 25, or if we have actually got data from previous year. That's on page 109, because I'd have expected to have data up to April 25, because it's a 25 report.
We can play.
Yeah, they probably go to March 25, I expect, anyway.
Yeah, I would as well. I would have thought it would have gone beyond April 2024. Because if you actually look at the heading, it actually talks 22 to 25. For it to finish at 24 doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Well, Diane will raise that. Thank you.
The other point, I need to go soon, so if I could just raise this one, is page 115, it makes reference to right care, right person, but then there is literally no detail on right care, right person. And I think given that this is such a controversial move, and we were told it would increase policing hours, reduce police time spent on, for example, mental health crisis, there actually isn't any reference to it. It's only referred to as they've briefed the Youth Commission on the concept of right care, right person. But I would have expected at this point them to be giving us some results on what that right care, right person is actually doing.
I think we can go back, Max, and say that we think it hasn't got sufficient information in it, or it's light.
Yeah.
Words to that effect, Diane, are you okay with that?
Yeah. And then also on page 115, again, I don't know if this is a typo or if it's my memory getting different funding streams wrong. I thought about 2 million was spent on SARC, not 3 million.
Sorry, whereabouts that is?
So that's on page 115. So halfway down the page, it talks about the overall investment is 3 million.
Yeah.
Now I understood it, I thought it was 2 million, and now it's saying it's 3.
We'll clarify.
So it would be worth clarifying it. And then my final point was on page 128. It talks about the RASO panels and what they can do. I just think it would have been helpful to have some data on what they've actually achieved, i.e. in terms of no further actions. The idea of the RASO panel is to see if any cases where there'd been no further action, whether actually it should be overturned. And it would be interesting to see if any have been overturned, what's the impact been of those RASO panels? Not what the purpose is, but what the impact has been of the RASO panel.
I think the impact is your question, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. It's telling me the purpose, but I'd be asking, but what's the impact been? I.e., we've overturned 3 decisions or 10 decisions or whatever it might be.
Lack of impact. So lack of information on impact. Page 128. Yeah.
And then am I able to go? Is that okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Am I excused? I'm so sorry. I'm going to ask Martin if you can ask those 3 about this.
Which one?
Thanks. Thank you very much for your time. Any more comments or observations on that? Martin, did you have one? No. On the fire. Okay. Chris, you're quiet. That's unusual.
I think I just upset too many people this morning already. I'm just looking at the complaints bit on the report on the police, and it's very, very, very bland.
What page are you looking at?
It is 110.
Could you speak into the microphone?
Sorry, can you hear me now? It is on green.
I can hear you now.
So yeah, just looking at the complaints section, it is, compared to what we've just been talking about, it is very, very bland and doesn't go into.
What page are you looking at?
Page 110. They've done a little bit of a brief section on complaints. They just give numbers out of how many they've received, but they don't talk about how we deal with them. But I suppose this is a PR document, so you wouldn't really expect that. It's just a bit disappointing, really, that we don't kind of accept there isn't really accept there's an issue there in the public domain anyway.
So what comment would you like us to put in?
They could have been a little bit more honest with the figures. You see the section I mean, Dan, on 110? They've just got broad numbers of comments received, complaints received. They've got a really nice feature on the Yorkshire show and how many policemen were there and dogs, etc., which is almost equivalent to the complaints bit.
So are you suggesting there's a lack of information and detail in?
Well, bearing in mind what we know, there is an issue there, and they're choosing to do a really, really bland. Say this is how many complaints we've had, but they're not telling the Joe public who would read this that there is a significant story there which they need to address. They've told us today that, but they're not telling Joe public that. Yeah. Okay. As I say, it's a PR document. I accept that, but I'm just a little bit disappointed they didn't go a bit further.
And just to make the Deputy Merson, would you say Chris asked that question?
Whoa.
It says it refers to 1,500 complaints and expressions of dissatisfaction. It's on very solid, but of course, it's small, that seems quite high. But when we drill down into the meeting, a lot of that is people perhaps not being updated in the time, which, the complaints, especially kind of very serious. I just think it lacks the context. It's a very bland figure. If the layperson really, we've got no country police campaign, we've got 1,500 complaints. Yeah. But actually, a complaint can be on a scale of 1 to 10. Yeah. Somebody not being seen the other day to the fact of an allegation of criminal conduct.
Yes, yes.
I just think it's a little bit
lack of context.
Yeah.
Are you okay with that, Diane?
Is that why you're leaving? You'll never do it again, Malcolm. No.
Anything else, members, on the police before I move to the vote?
Just one.
On the police.
Yeah. On the police one.
Yeah.
It also, I think, applies to the second one. I think that overall, the report has quite a lot of lack of context. Talking about aims and aspirations and importances. And I personally feel that more data within the report and more context generally, but not just what's been mentioned specifically, would be helpful, because there are some very nice thoughts here, and I hope they'll be carried out in a positive and substantive way, but I'd like to generally have more. I don't know how that can be resolved, maybe through liaising with the Deputy Mayor about what we as a panel think ought to be in the report, maybe more general approach.
I think one of the difficulties of both reports is that I think the Deputy Mayor doesn't see it as her report, because she's reporting on what was undertaken by the previous commissioner. Therefore, there may be some difficulty in
Yes.
that.
I can understand that.
That's context.
No.
Diane, are you happy that you've captured the panel's comments?
Yeah.
24.
Yeah, that's fairly brief, but that's absolutely fine.
No. Actually, Chair, Malcolm's pointed out that this report is 24-25, and it's when he took over. So I just think it does appear to be contextually light.
It is her report, but on a police and crime plan
From the previous
that was
commissioner.
from the previous commissioner, if that makes sense.
But she's been in office a year, so 24-25 is her tenure.
Yeah. And can we move on to the? Sorry, Malcolm, do you want to add to that? That's okay. Apologies. Can we move on to the following report? Page 131. I believe you've got a couple of comments from Mags.
Yes, I've got two that Mags has asked me to ask. The first one is on page 138, and it refers to, under the halfway down, road safety in focus, about Vision Zero ambition where no road death is considered acceptable. And there's no context again. And Mags commented would have expected the numbers and volumes of road traffic collisions where there's been a death or serious injury. In other words, without that context, you don't really know what the starting point is and where they are now and how they get to the future. There might be no deaths during that year. Well, there haven't been. Of course, we know there have been, but there may have been 100 or 50 or whatever.
Yeah, it's in that first paragraph.
The first paragraph, yes.
Yeah.
So it's adding some sort of
numbers.
And
a baseline.
Yes, a baseline. And then the second one on page 147, which is about equipment. And given she's asked about reference to new vehicles purchased and what's been ordered. In other words, again, they're looking at the replacement of equipment and not enough detail. Again, what new equipment and what's actually been ordered, and perhaps more importantly, in the post-COVID, with all the problems with delivery of vehicles and equipment, when that equipment is likely to be delivered.
I was just trying to see where there was a reference to the vehicle.
Well, I'm not certain 147. I think Mags might have got the page wrong. It's unusual.
That's got sharing buildings, it's got productivity, it's got breathing.
Yes. Yes.
It does say what the equipment is at the bottom, doesn't it? If it's breathing apparatus.
Yes, it doesn't say. Well, it says go live in October 25, so it does give that date. But it doesn't actually say really how many units, where they're going to be based, which might be important, particularly in areas of.
Could you just repeat what Mags has put?
The actual note to me was, given the rise in council tax for new equipment, would have expected reference to new vehicle purchases. Vehicle purchases and what's been ordered, because there has been.
There's no mention of vehicle. That's what I was looking for.
Sorry, there's no mention, and there should have been. Yeah. Because bearing in mind, we all know that North Yorkshire has had an ageing fleet, which has been barely usable. And questions about, well, you can have a fleet of 10, but it's no good if you've only got 2 or 3 that are viable on the road. So Yes, I think I would back that question myself anyway.
Yeah,
I think so.
I agree. I was looking
Yeah,
for reference to Bertels on there and I couldn't
Yeah,
see it.
well,
Was it.
that was her point. Sorry.
Yeah, perfect. Anybody else? Diane, are you happy that A, we've demonstrated, looked at it, and B, we've got some errors that that's absolutely good. But thank you. So, Diane, I think it's over to you because it's item 14, the work programme.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So as you'll see, I've tried to align the priorities, the principles for the new police and crime plan and fire and rescue plan with the panel's work programme with the 4 or 5 meetings over the next year. And on page 159, I've gone through those plans and just tried to identify some of the particular issues that the Mayor and Deputy Mayor are looking to address, where they might fit. It's a little bit tricky because the fire and rescue plan has certain objectives which aren't crossed over in the police and crime plan. But essentially, you know, you have things like prevention, protection, finances. So try to sort of keep to those broad themes. And the Appendix A, therefore, is really sort of propositional from October onwards as a way of sort of grouping some of those issues. But obviously, if members feel there are certain things that are more critical than the things that are down there, we can look at those. But that cover paper gives you a potential long list that you could sort of take from and plug into the programme over the next year. So at the next meeting in York, it's suggested that as we've tended to use the October meeting as one to look at things like VOG, that we continue to perhaps do that. So protecting the public, effective emergency response. So with a focus around protecting vulnerable people. We've talked previously about children and young people and domestic and sexual violence. I know Magda isn't here, but it's something she in particular started to look at. And I think the office has started to do some paperwork previously around that for us. And there's something then around vulnerable people, quite a bit of work around online fraud and cybercrime in that space. I thought might be helpful. I had put down community risk management plan, obviously from the chief fire officer. That's only just going out to consultation, so there might not be too much to say about that in October. But I know, just echoing your point, Chair, trying to keep to a couple of items.
Yeah.
I've just been looking to do that where possible across the programme. There'll always be a need to be reactive and put other things in, like HMI reports and the like that come up, but just trying to stick to a couple of things so you have the benefit of digging a little bit deeper. But obviously happy to take any comments around.
So on the community risk management plan, do you think we should move that to January?
Potentially, yes, if it's not finishing until into the autumn.
Yeah, I think that's going to be too soon.
Yeah, I'll keep in touch with the office. I'll ask what would be a feasible thing to do.
Can I invite any comments on the contents? Yeah. Yeah. In that case, I'm quite pleased it's only a light agenda because it means we can have a deeper dive into it. So, okay. Any more comment observations? No, thank you. That brings us to agenda item 16. So Wednesday, 8th of October at 10:30, City of York Council West Office. So it brings us to the end of the meeting. Before we go for the sandwich, I just want to formally thank Malcolm for your participation over the last two years. I think your background very much helped us on the panel. You'll be missed, but we wish you well in your new role managing the highways of North Yorkshire. So thank you, members, and I hope that as many of you can will join us for sandwiches. So thank you, and officers, thank you for your support in what's been a challenging meeting with the microphones. So thank you very much.